Welcome, everyone. It is the 28th of February, 2022, and I'm really delighted to be here tonight with Marce Evans, living in California, and her topic is a really interesting one, pivoting careers from doctor to rancher. And I'm going to invite you to post questions. And where you do that is you do it in the Zoom chat, which is at the bottom of your Zoom tool. And we'll have questions at the end, and Marce will speak for like 40 minutes or however long it takes. And I want to just say one thing about Marce. Tony Malmberg and I actually had Marce in our holistic plant grazing class about a year ago, and it was a pleasure to get to know her there. And one thing that I learned about Marce is she's very international. Her dad's from Canada and her mom is from Mexico, and she lives in the United States. And so she's a real North American woman. And I want to welcome you, Marce, and have you tell your story about this big change that you made in your life. So over to you, Marce.
Thank you, Sheila. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. And thank you, everybody, for coming. Really appreciate all the support. And yes, Tony and Sheila, your course was very, how do I share my, I found it. It was very inspiring and very useful, because even though you're in London, Sheila, I found it in California very useful. Just around the globe, we're all dealing with similar problems. So here we go. Okay, so my name is Marce Evans, and that's my email, marce@theherdfoundation.org, FDN. And these are our cows that we're regenerating rangelands in Southern California with. And I'll be talking a little bit more about my journey, how I got into regenerative agriculture, and career shifts and how to get involved in this very exciting movement. So I like to start with this slide just because many people, at least amongst, when I was younger and amongst my friends, see water and cows and see them together and kind of go, why are the cows there? The cows are going to make manure and trample the river lands. They're not going to be helpful for how do we get clean water with cows. And these are our Barzona cattle on the right. We run a 500 head of bulls, mama cows, cow-calf pairs. We do completely grass finishing cows and completely from birth to slaughter, direct consumer driven business. This is California. This is our ranch in Trabuco Canyon. This was taken in January. You can see the snow on the mountain. Those mountains are about 5,000 feet high. When people think of California, they do not think about mountains and cows and rangelands, yet most of California, even 100, 150 years ago, a lot of it was open space. This, unfortunately, is also California, right? Dead and desertifying lands. And this too often right now, is California, as well as different areas in the West, all over the West Coast, and even Europe, Australia. All of us are dealing with wildfires on the urban, suburban, wildland interface. So a little bit more about me. How did I go from being a doctor? I was enrolled, I did the MD PhD program out of University of California, Irvine. I love horses. That's the short and the long of it. When I was very little, you can see in the lower right, that's me at 8 years old, taking my first riding lesson. And that picture is actually from Mexico City. My mother's Mexican, my dad is Canadian, and I was born in the middle in San Francisco. So I am truly North America, Sheila. Thank you for pointing that out. So I began riding horses as a little girl in Mexico City, which is a huge, urban city. But I always lived in California, and I was always going back and forth between Mexico to visit my mother's family. My dad's from Hamilton, Ontario, completely different kind of environment. And then I lived north of San Francisco in Marin County, where there's redwood trees. And this picture on the upper right is actually me in the summer, right before I was going to college, showing hunter jumper horses up in Santa Rosa at the Santa Rosa Fairgrounds. So I then, when I went to college, loved animals, loved horses, loved nature and the environment, really wanted to, you know, pick a place that I want to study the environment, but I also, you know, enjoyed science. My dad's an electrical engineer. And so I decided to go the pre-medicine route. This year is my sister, Mariana, and she is actually in Istanbul, Turkey at the moment. So we are truly international family. And that's on the first day of medical school. But when I was in college, I did physiology and neuroscience. I studied Alzheimer's and dementia, epilepsy, ecosystems, dynamics a little bit, but I always kind of stuck to the pre-medicine track, and then rode horses consistently on the side. So then after college, university, I went on to medical school. I enrolled in the MD PhD program. I briefly thought about being a veterinarian, and I very much respect and work closely with veterinarians, you know, with our jumping horses. But I also, you know, kind of wanted to make money and thought medicine might be the best path to do that and still be able to have my hunter jumper horses on the side. But what they don't tell you when, you know, you do go into careers is sometimes you end up sitting in front of a desk, or you end up being in a hospital all day long working. So for me, that was not fulfilling my holistic context of what I wanted to do with my life. Science is very interesting. Medicine, you know, especially with COVID, there's a lot of work-life balance issues in many careers. And I was always walking these two paths, right, of the horses. I was a professional in the horses. Pretty much as a teenager, I got paid to ride horses, which makes you a professional in the sport. But I was captain of the equestrian team in college, but I was also, you know, getting straight A's, trying to get into medical school, doing all the things you got to do to do well on the school side. So how did I go from working in the hospital and you know, doing all that? Well, I met these people. And so that's me in the middle. On the left is Ryan Fitzpatrick. On the right, on the ground, is Frank Fitzpatrick, his father. And Frank is the last cattle rancher in Orange County. So he's been a very inspiring mentor to me. The man on the white horse is one of our friends, Donnie, on his horse Blue, and they volunteer to help us herd cattle. And it's hard to see here, but anybody that rides horses knows I'm actually in an English saddle. So one of my little jumper horse saddles, and everybody else is cowboying. But that's my background. You know, I grew up riding horses, English, and jumping horses and training young horses at breeding farms internationally, Canada, Mexico, and the United States. So that's what I do. And it's okay to be different, right? You can still be a cowboy in an English saddle. So this is really where I found my calling. And it was convenient because of the COVID thing. That just solidified my passion for the environmentalist movement, animals, how livestock can, you know, help the environment. So one thing that Frank Fitzpatrick and other mentors really nailed into me as soon as I started getting involved in the ranching business and hanging out with cowboys is something called holistic management. And many of you listening may already know what this is. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going over it, although we can talk about it at the end. Holistic management is basically a way of living. It's not just about grazing. Alan Savory developed this method in Zimbabwe, Africa, in New Mexico, in Colorado, but many other people have taken it different ways and applied it to lives. You know, how do I want to live my life holistically? What's the big picture? What are my value systems, right? On the left is a picture of our herd, the 5-bar beef Barzona cattle herd. And they're grazing in Santa Isabel in San Diego County, California. And you can see they're grazing, the plants in the front. And I really like this picture because you can really see that they're in a paddock that's grazed, and the paddock to the right of them is going to be their next move. And doing things like that is one of the methods for regenerative agriculture and regenerative ranching and holistic plain grazing. So really quickly, I'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll go back to career paths. Our soil is sick and broken. If you think about the environmental movement, all you think about is cows, meat is bad, cars are bad, people are bad. Well, that's true, but it's more than just the carbon in the atmosphere. It's more than just climate change. It's actually the healthy soil beneath our feet. So the Herd Foundation, which Frank Fitzpatrick, who is here, I don't know if you can see on the left, giving a ranch tour to a group of the public. I'm on a horse, took the picture. The Herd Foundation is our nonprofit. I'm the executive director and president, and we're seeking to restore the environment using livestock and grazing cattle in a way that helps the environment, not hurts it. So you can see in the picture on the right, there's some little girls. They may have been from a 4-H group or a homeschooling group, and then I'm in the background actually on my mare. So that's one of the things we do, and one of the educational components that's, for me, as really a passion. I really enjoy teaching people how to ride horses. I enjoyed, mentoring younger people in science, especially undergraduates and younger graduate students. And for me, teaching is how I learn. So I really enjoy education. So our mission at the Herd Foundation is to promote holistic plant grazing as a form of regenerative agriculture to help solve our water, fire, and environmental crisis. And if you're neither regenerative agriculture, which most of you probably aren't, this is a good definition from Kiss the Ground, a great organization, which actually I took their soil advocacy class before I took the class with Sheila Cook and Tony Malmberg on holistic management. And that was a great introduction, part of my education after my MD PhD program, to learn about regenerative agriculture and soil. And is this really, cow propaganda to save the earth, or is this actually something that's real and scientifically accurate? And the more I looked into the research and the science, the more I was convinced you can't ignore how food production and meat production are done if you're looking to help climate change and help human societies continue with all of the things going on. So how is quickly healthy soil created? One of Alan Savory's pivotal things that he talks about, especially in his TED Talk from 2013, is healthy soil is created by large herds of grazing animals. Think of the savannas of Africa, the old movies with the herds of buffalo going by. You need large herds of grazing animals. In California, we have large herds of tule elk, but if you go into the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, you'll actually find American horses. You'll find bison. You'll find, the ancestors of the cow, the aurochs. So even though cattle are not tule elk, they're not buffalo, they can still be used in a manner which helps recreate the trampling and animal impact effect of large herds of grazing animals. So here's a picture of our cattle, the Barzona cattle from 5 Bar Beef, mimicking what those ancient large herds accomplished. So it's not the cow, it's the how. It's not, it's not just eating vegetables going to save the planet, although vegetables have a role, of course. It's how we manage land. It's how we think about the environment. It's how we think about animals and our place on this planet. 40% of the world's land is grasslands, which is an interesting statistic I didn't know. Thank you, Kiss the Ground. So basically, we're using livestock in such a way that's helping create healthy grassland ecosystems. These pictures are from South Africa, where there's 8 inches of rainfall per year. On the left, you can see a ranch that's slowly turning into desert. On the right is a ranch managed with holistic management. Here's from Southern California. On the right is our 5 Bar Beef Trabuco Canyon Ranch. where we do holistic planned grazing. You can see this was taken in the springtime, I think early spring, before the grass had really started popping up. There's a little bit of, there's green on the right. You can see a little bit of green on the California Conservancy side, but that land has been massively overrested from all grazing, other than a couple deer that show up every now and then. And then the land on the bottom is the toll roads land. That's a 23-acre parcel that the Orange County Transportation Corridor agencies manage. It's basically environmental mitigation land to help mitigate the impact of all of the cement and asphalt and toll roads highway construction through California and Orange County. So they have this little nature reserve. It's right next to our cattle ranch, and it was at huge risk of wildfire danger and oxidized plants, because they had just overrested it too long. So this was last year. This was after we did our first pass with the cows. And then this year will be our second year, and it's a 3-year science-based monitoring program to see the impact of holistic planned grazing on the soil, on plant biodiversity, and on a number of other different outcomes. So I'm not going to talk too much about what's holistic planned grazing unless you all want to hear more, but basically we move the cows in a manner that creates soil disturbance, which we call animal impact. Grazing animals help build healthy soil with manure, urine, and trampling the land. Back in the day, predators used to move the herds, which allows plants to regenerate before they're being grazed again. Rest is an extremely important part of holistic planned grazing, and timing your rest is quite important. Humans, whether they're on horseback, on ATVs, as you can see in the picture here on the right, on foot, using electric fence, using virtual collars. There's many, many ways to do this, but we as humans can manage the cattle in such a way that moves the cattle in a holistic manner and prevents overgrazing. And one thing that I think is really important, it took me kind of a couple months to years to really nail into my head, overgrazing is a product of time. So it's not just, rotating the cattle and every year you keep grazing the same pastures in the same way. It's really looking at your land, making a holistic planned grazing chart, and really timing your grazing correctly with the tools and labor available to you, right? Because all the things I mentioned range from cheap. If you're just one person with 5 cows, perhaps you could just move them on foot with some electric fence and keep moving the electric fence. If you're managing 40,000 acres in the outback of Australia, that's not really cost or labor effective. So you have to balance, right, the labor and the time cost and the money of how to manage a regenerative ranching operation, or even a small regenerative holistic planned grazing farm. Here's a couple of benefits of holistic planned grazing, and you can see our Barzona cattle with the lake in the background. That's actually Oso Reservoir and Lake Mission Viejo there in the background, and the mountains, the coastal range of California. The Pacific Ocean is just over the hill there in that picture. And there's many reasons why we do holistic planned grazing, so you can pick whichever one is your passion and why you're doing it. But you always have to remember, just because these are all the benefits, you may not see them all right away. It takes time. Nature doesn't operate on human time. It operates on nature time. Wildfire. Now with all of the wildfires happening, every year we seem to have these Holocaust fires, these huge giant mega fires. Wildfire mitigation is probably the #1 reason we do contract grazing on other people's land. In Orange County specifically, we're now doing contract grazing on toll roads mitigation land, like I mentioned. We're also in talks with the city of Irvine and the city of Brea for grazing public lands in a way that helps reduce wildfire risk. And if you live next to a place that's grazed in a manner that's holistic planned grazing, or any grazing, you're actually really reducing the impact of fire on houses next door. So yeah, wildfire risk, I think, is probably the #1 reason people are doing contract grazing with goats throughout California. Sheep are great too. Cattle are heavier, so there's the pros and cons to using cattle, but that would be the #1 reason we're doing contract grazing. And I wanted to mention, an arid, brittle environment with seasonal rainfall like Southern California, water shortage and drought are just always on our minds. And that's just huge. Not only are we preventing wildfire risk, we're also regenerating the groundwater. So one of our first sponsors was actually the Mesa Water District. And people are like, wait, what? The water district? And we met with the board, and they really got it. We were able to talk about regenerating groundwater and using cattle in a way that helps with that. And they were one of our first biggest financial sponsors. Because the missing link is really that healthy soil acts like a sponge to trap and increase water penetration down to all the aquifers that all of us, houses, cities, everybody is pouring water from the aquifer, from below ground sources or from above ground sources. So here's just a little slide about a little bit of the science, really showing that keeping photosynthesizing plants on the ground is really important. Preventing runoff, in Orange County, it's basically been cemented over. So we have tons of cement, which is basically compacted, not even earth, it's cement, asphalt. The minute it rains in Orange County, we got an average of 14 inches a year. Basically the next day, all that rain is run off into the ocean where it's evaporating. So keeping photosynthesizing plants covering bare ground is really important, whether you do that with cows, whether you're planting things, crops, a vegetable garden, just keeping the water in the soil and keeping that soil sponge active is just so important. Here's another little slide about water from Kiss the Ground, a great Los Angeles-based organization. And I really love this quote, so I'm going to read it. It's not the quantity of rain that falls, but rather how usable or effective that rainfall is. How many trillions of gallons of water will have been lost? A full inch came down in a short time, leading to localized flooding. The next day, the land was bone dry. All that rain did nothing to nourish the land, thirsty as it might have been. And that's a quote from Judith Schwartz about Alan Savory, the founder of Holistic Management. Here's another little slide about the science, and we can come back to this if anybody's interested about the different small water cycles and the large water cycle too. And there's the aquifer that I was mentioning, above ground rivers and below ground rivers. And our cities, of course. Cities are an important source of heat and fossil fuels and all sorts of different effects. We can touch back on this if anybody's interested at the end. And remember, when we're creating healthy soil, whether you're planting cover crops, whether you're doing no-till agriculture, whether you're doing livestock, our goal is to help feed the soil microorganisms, help create that nice, healthy, living soil with bacteria and different protozoa and different microorganisms under the grass. It's not just the grass we're looking at or the plants living above ground. It's really the below ground ecosystems. Here's a little slide about the soil food web. It's just plants, fungi, nematodes, arthropods, protozoa. I mean, if you take one of the soil classes, for instance, from Nicole Masters, she talks a lot about this stuff, and many other people are focusing on soil too, soil for climate. A lot of farming people are realizing, and ranchers are realizing, it's not just the plants, it's not just above ground, it's really the below ground animals and microorganisms that help affect those big creatures we see and think of as we think of ecosystems, the birds and the animals, as well as all the bacteria and protozoa. So remember, cows, it's how you use the cow. It's not the cow, it's the how. That's a great slogan. And if you don't like cows, there's goats, there's different things you can do. Maybe you like pigs or chickens. Everybody can do something small to help regenerate the ecosystems and help the environment. We do cows and horses. So a couple lessons I've learned in my life, right? So a lot of people are like, well, why aren't you working in the hospital right now? Why, you went through all this long training, which I did. In the United States, to be a doctor, you have to do 4 years of medical school, 4 years of undergraduate university training on top of high school. And then I took 2 years off to work and really figure out what I wanted to do and prepare I worked in science, looking at statin cholesterol lowering drugs, was working in the horses the whole time forward, went to medical school, was doing my MD PhD, and it wasn't the right fit for me. I love science and medicine is great. And I'm so happy for everybody that, finds their passion operating in the hospital room. But I always was applying what I was learning in medical school really to the horses, and to my family and friends. And, I always wanted to be in nature. And unfortunately, the hospital, it's not nature inside the hospital. So if you start feeling like you're failing, fail forward, because that's the number one thing I can think of. If you're considering a career shift and you're just, not in the right place, you have to find something new. You have to find a mentor that's doing something that you love, that's passionate, that you can ask questions to, get involved in your passions in whatever way you can. For me, Frank Fitzpatrick at 5 Bar Beef really was a great mentor. Roger Savory, Alan Savory's son, was working with us at the time. He was a great mentor, really taught me a lot about holistic management in 2019. Just getting out there on horseback and work. And, I never thought I would be studying soil science ever, but I wanted to be out on the grounds with the horses and the cattle. And somehow it led to this. If you're at home, and you want to support regenerative agriculture, sure, you can go out and buy land and buy animals, but you can also make choices with your wallet. You can support local food production and regenerative agriculture. Yes, is regenerative agriculture products or organic products more expensive than conventionally produced agriculture? Yes, but that's there for a reason. It takes a lot of time and labor to raise a cow in a way which uses no chemicals, no pesticides. We don't feed them grain. It takes longer to grow cattle to be beef cattle until it lands on your plate. It takes longer, even different with vegetables. There's now, regenerative wool, regenerative clothes, that's raised in such a manner that is helping the environment. So make choices with your wallet when you can. And if you want to, start a regenerative agriculture operation, or you're small and you're just getting started, there's a lot of different things to think about. Many of these operations are small family operations. So you really have to balance different things: the labor, the time, what kind of fencing suits your needs, what are your passions, what's your holistic context? These are all really important questions. Maybe you want to go gung-ho and start buying land and doing regenerative agriculture or ranching, but maybe it's just not the right time. Maybe you start small, you support a local farmer, you go take a ranch tour, you start reading more about these things. Definitely read Alan Savory's book, Holistic Management, that I put up earlier. My biggest piece of advice, number one, take a holistic management course. I'm somebody that really likes education, obviously, since I did, went through a PhD, and like writing, I like education that's set up in a way where you have homework and you're accountable. If you're not into homework and you don't want to be accountable, that's okay too. Everybody learns at a different pace, right? So the Savory organization has quite a number of different holistic management course options. You can do it online, you can do it in person. And number two, find a mentor in your area. If all you're reading is about holistic management, in a different part of the world, and you're like, gosh, you go home and look outside, and you're like, how could it ever work here? I live in the Sahara Desert. Well, find somebody in your Sahara Desert area or your area that is doing regenerative agriculture. And if nobody's there, maybe start something, but get mentors, find people that have been there before. Don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, you can reinvent the wheel if you want, but it's much easier if you have a system of support, a network, mentorship that helps, who's been there, done that. And always follow your passions. For me, it was obviously clearly the horses ever since I was 8 years old. And having been a professional, athlete, it's wonderful too. But, I forgot about my love for the environment and ecosystems. So for me and my holistic context, that was always an important part. Even when I was in the hospital, I always put in recycling things when I could. And, holistic context in your value system. Make sure you're doing something that's not against your values and your passions. And if you're starting to get involved in regenerative agriculture, please make a business plan and a holistic financial plan. It's painful. Nobody likes to do it, but it's, these are all businesses. And if you need help, there's mentors that'll help you. But definitely don't just go out and buy a whole bunch of goats or cows and have, don't have a mentor and a plan. So this is our ranch again in Trabuco Canyon. You can really see the suburbia right behind our ranch. And remember, despite all of our accomplishments, we owe our existence to a 6-inch layer of topsoil and the fact it rains. And I think that's one of the most important things to keep in mind. If you're, the Renaissance, the great, beautiful museums and art of human society, none of that would have been possible without agriculture, without feeding humans. And the only way we can do agriculture is if we have healthy soil. So thank you very much. These are some of our collaborators and sponsors and different people that have helped us along the way. And I really appreciate everybody coming to my talk.
Thank you so much, Marce. That was really well done.
You're welcome.
Okay, we've got a question here from our studio audience, and that is, can you talk about healthy soil and how it links to nutrient-dense food and human health?
Yeah. Can you repeat the question one more time?
Nutrient healthy. Can talk to us about soil and how it links to nutrient-dense food and ultimately to human physical health.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So nutrient-dense food, basically when you plant, let's say a carrot or a tomato, or a cow is eating grass, you're getting nutrients right from that food that then you're putting in your mouth. But where did that plant or that animal that your food came from get the nutrients, right? It's the minerals in the soil. So healthy soil really improves the nutrient quality of your beef, of your lamb, of your eggs, of your vegetables. Unfortunately, with the big emphasis on industrial agriculture and adding inputs to agriculture like fertilizers and pesticides and different things, we've actually really decreased the nutrient content of our food. So there's some studies looking at nutrient content going back 50 years or whenever people start looking at this. And it's true, your grandmother's tomatoes that she grew in her garden, that was actually more nutritious than the tomatoes you're buying today.
Mm-hmm. Now I want to ask you more about this transition that you made in your life. What did your family and friends think? And did they support you? Were they a little bit of a roadblock? How did that go down?
That's a very good question. In general, I would say they supported me. I mean, anybody that knows me knows I was always riding horses, before work. I would be working in the hospital on one of my second, third year medical school rotations. I have to be in the hospital at 4 or 5 in the morning until midnight or for whatever reason. And then I would go see my horses afterwards. Like I would go literally to the barn, put in the after hours coat and go just pet my horses or take them for a little walk in the dark, just because I needed that animal contact in order to really rejuvenate myself for what I was doing. And the happiest I've ever been and the most grounded and the most productive, I think, in school and in my career was honestly when I was really balancing the horses and nature with my other pursuits. So yeah, they were supportive, but definitely I got some funny looks and, definitely my dad was like, are you sure you want to do, why are you doing ranching with your education? I don't get it, but they've come around. Definitely never let anybody tell you your dreams are not are too big, or that your dreams are not realistic. And I mean, you should listen to those people because they probably have a point that usually, but don't let anybody crush your dreams.
Thank you for that. All right, another question is, do you own or lease your ranch? And where did you get the finance to purchase your ranch and start your ranch? And how many acres is your ranch?
Oh, okay. So number one, it's not my ranch. Frank Fitzpatrick, my boyfriend's dad, is the one who owns 5 Bar Beef. And we do own land in Silverado, California, but we do not own the land. The land is leased. Part of our goal with the the Herd Foundation is to purchase the land that we've been grazing since 2007 in Trabuco Canyon. So we have a variety of leased properties and contract grazing properties. Frank Fitzpatrick has actually made a great career of owning 500 head of cattle. And right now they're spread out between 2 or 3 different properties up and down California. But he has grazed the Castaic prison, for instance. He's grazed land in San Diego all the way up to Oregon on the Central Coast. And that is another strategy that, for instance, some people doing sheep herding or goat herding are doing, right? You can put your investment in your animals, but then you can move them around. The downside to that is the cost of transportation, right? To move your animals around. So all of the contract grazing contracts that we're doing now, we're factoring in the cost of transporting animals, because with the cost of diesel and the cost of gas and the time it takes, right? And the stress on the animals, you have to be careful, especially when you have mamas and babies. You don't want to be moving them very often. It's just too stressful.
Now, here's a really interesting question. If you were practicing medicine, again, how would holistic management inform your medical practice?
Oh, well, how would holistic management inform my practice? Well, I mean, I think I would focus patients on holistic health, right? So I was trained in what we call allopathic medicine or Western medicine. Western medicine is great for many, many things. If you have a broken bone, you should go to the emergency room and get your broken bone set. We're really good at setting broken bones, for instance. But there is a role for alternative medicine and different other holistic things. You always have to be careful with whatever advice you're getting. But as a practitioner, I was always focused on the brain. I have a lot of publications on statins and cholesterol lowering medications and how those affect the brain and cognition and mental thinking. And most people, when you think of statin cholesterol lowering drugs, you're thinking of the heart, right? Because they're preventing heart attacks, they're lowering your cholesterol, which is all very true. But for us, when I was working with the UCSD statin study and the Guam Research Group in San Diego, we were already thinking holistically, even before I learned about holistic management. You take it, for instance, using the example of statins, you take a statin to lower your cholesterol, right? So that's an input into your body because you have a problem, your cholesterol is too high, or maybe you had a heart attack or a stroke, or you have diabetes and your doctor says, you know what, you need to lower your cholesterol. You're not doing it with food and exercise, which, by the way, is the holistic way to lower cholesterol. But here's a pill, and the pills really work. They really lower cholesterol and they reduce heart attacks and stroke in some people. Usually, and I can talk more about that if people are interested, but what happens, especially with statins, they act so high in the cholesterol synthesis pathway that you are not only lowering your cholesterol, you're also lowering coenzyme Q10, which gives energy to your body. Coenzyme Q10 is used by your mitochondria, which is another thing I studied. And if you don't have enough energy, you're going to have problems with fatigue. You're going to have muscle problems, muscle pain. You're going to have cognitive decline. My first author paper way back in 2009 was on a reversible cognitive loss that looks like Alzheimer's dementia. But when you take people off statins, it goes away. And that was a very controversial finding. Very controversial, but it got added to the statin labels because as a black box warning label, because there are enough people that were having these issues. Not saying y'all, if you're on statins, that you should stop taking your statin necessarily, but it's a conversation to have with your doctor. One of the biggest issues I saw when I was in medical school was patients who kind of just came to doctors for a quick fix, right? Here I am smoking, drinking, eating potato chips every day. And now I'm finally hit 40, 50, 60 years old. I'm having all these problems. And you're expecting the hospital or doctor to fix it. And, they try, they do their best. But the doctor's not in charge of your life, right? You as a patient, and all of us, you have to think holistically about, what is my goals and what my holistic context is. If you can't, if adding medication is the only way to get your cholesterol down, maybe that is part of what you need to do. But yeah, no, I always encourage my patients to exercise and eat right and get outside, and also be in nature. There's something about the environment and green grass and animals that I think really does a lot for the soul, for health. Sunshine, there's studies that showing that vitamin D and sunshine, even if you just in hospital rooms have a little bit of sunshine and natural lighting, that there's huge impacts on human health.
Wow, that was wonderful. I want to ask you more about this Herd Foundation and what you're doing. Are you finding that you're making impact in terms of shifting people's thinking about what they can do to prevent fire?
Yeah, I think we are. There's been a lot of pushback, I think, and different finger pointing, at least in California, on different, why are these huge wildfires happening? I think grazing is becoming more and more recognized as a tool that we can use, especially in the western areas of the United States. I think everybody that's wanted contract grazing in the last couple of years, fire is definitely number one on their minds. I mean, in Orange County, we actually, oddly enough, the week we met with the city of Irvine about a big 2,000 acre plus property, public land property to graze, a fire broke out in February. That's not fire season in Southern California. February is smack in the middle of our rainy season. And it was very odd that happened. It was burning in Laguna Beach, the Laguna Coast. It's called the Emerald Bay Fire. It happened in February of this year, and it burnt into the 2 nature preserves that border the nature preserve that we've been in talks about doing holistic plant grazing on.
Are you working on making some case studies that can be helpful for people to understand what the impact of grazing can be to prevent creation of the fuel for the fire?
Yes, yeah. That's definitely one of the goals of the Herd Foundation and of our partnership with the Toll Roads property with Land IQ. We're also partnering with Savory's Ecological Outcome Verification program out of the, I'm going to say it wrong, the UV hub, that was the Jefferson hub up in Northern California. And I will need to write those up. I know there's also good work being done up at UC Berkeley, looking at different wildfire goals and throughout California. I mean, this is a huge topic for California at both the city level, county level, state level, as well as, in the West in general.
Great. And you said earlier that you are using the virtual collars on the livestock, and I'm wondering, what's your experience been with that?
So we use Vents, which is a virtual collar system specifically designed for cattle. It's a company based out of San Diego. We have been pilot testing their collars. I believe we were one of the first pilot test ranches since fall of 2018. So we've been using collars on animals as young as yearlings up to cow-calf pairs and bulls, and it's really been helpful. Actually, I guess I could share my screen again, and I don't have it up, but yeah, it's a great system. So the virtual fence collars for Vents, there's basically a satellite tower that they put on your property. Our property is so mountainous that we actually have 2 satellite towers. And then it's a battery operated collar that reports to the GPS satellites where the cow is. So say if your cow strays onto the neighboring, Buddhist monasteries property, like happens every now and then, not very often, but sometimes, you can go find out at 5 a.m. before you get a phone call, or the animal control, and get your cow. But also you can see, where are they grazing? You have a historical record, which is really complementary to the holistic plant grazing plans, of where they actually grazed. Going back, as long as you're collecting data. You can also fence out different riparian areas if you're trying to protect, for instance, nesting birds or fish spawning habitat, or maybe you have an area that we're getting a lot of trespassers and you don't want the cows over there. We've been successfully using the fence collars on the property in Trabuco Canyon. Right now we have 32 bulls there with collars on, but we've had as many as 75 animals with babies. And I could talk about virtual collars a lot because I often get questions about it. One of the really cool things is you can look at them on your phone. So let's say you wake up in the morning and you're planning out your day and maybe you're going to go ride your horse to gather your cattle. You can over coffee see where they're at, and maybe that changes your plan for the day. The virtual collars are great. The one downside is that they are expensive. I think different people are getting grants for them. Vents is scaling up slowly because they're definitely trying to make sure there's enough customer service for every ranch. And I know there's another company in Europe, No Fence, right? That I believe does sheep and goats and also cattle. Virtual collars are definitely exciting. However, they are a tool, right? They're a tool just like your horse and cowboy are a tool, just like your electric fence is a tool, just like instinctive migratory grazing is a different tool some people use. You still have to get eyes on the land. You still have to get eyes on your animals. You still have to figure out what's going on, but it's a great tool.
We've got one final question here. Have you considered becoming a Savory Institute accredited professional? Based on your presentation, you could pass the exit review.
Yes, no, it's definitely, I'm actually on the path to do that. I've been a little busy with some lots of other things, but yes, no, I think the Savory accredited professional route is just such an easy way to step by step, get educated in this. Yes, that is hopefully what I will be one this year, I'm hoping.
Wonderful.
And we work with a variety of Savory accredited professionals. Juan Carlos Villapando is a Mexican Savory accredited professional who works in California. He goes back and forth between his ranch in Baja California and San Diego. And when we were on the Central Coast, and San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties. So he's been a great mentor also, as well as Tony Momberg, and as well as, a whole lot of other Savory accredited professionals. So it's a great program. I highly, highly recommend it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Marce. It was such a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for your time and your insight.
You're welcome. Thank you guys so much for being here. And thank you, Sheila, for inviting me to speak. I appreciate it.